Welcome to episode 133 of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Breitman. To you on Friday, August 11th. Happy Friday. We are now over a week into Rutgers football training camp, and the Rutgers men's basketball program is a few days into their overseas trip, currently in Senegal. Wanted to cover both of those topics from the perspective of how to be measured or how to look at the information we're getting. Because we all want more. It's August. We're chomping at the bit for the season to start. Football, obviously, first. And any little bit of information right now can be hyper analyzed. And, I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. The media is guilty of it. Instant access to media, all that. I think it's important to keep things in context. And I wanted to talk for in that perspective for both football and men's basketball. So let's start with football. On Wednesday, Big Ten Network was there, annual trip. Jerry DiNardo, Howard Griffith, and Dave Revson go to every Big Ten training camp and do a daily special there. And I wrote about it this week. I have some quotes in there. Greg Schiano was interviewed, so was Kirk Shiraka and Joe Harasimiak, the two coordinators, as well as Deion Jennings and Gavin Wimsatt. Very little practice footage on brand with Schiano in terms of seeing that. But I thought that there was some, obviously, you could argue, telling quotes from the BTN crew. But I also like to look at what the coaches say, too. Overall, we didn't learn anything really new in terms of we knew the defense was going to be the strength of this team, and we knew the offense was a concern. Did it maybe bring up that level of concern in terms of things that were said by the BTN crew? I would say that's fair. And I definitely think that, Jerry DiNardo talking about the concern to whether Rutgers can actually pass the ball, you have to take that at face value. Now, that being said, it was one practice. So I think you take value in what he said, but you also have to put it in the right bucket, so to speak. You can't, put that in the overreaction bucket. You put it in the concern bucket. But if we're all being truthful, we were all concerned going in, knowing, hey, will Rutgers be able to throw the ball this year? They haven't been able to do it. So he didn't really say anything new, but I think that a weekend, everyone starts with optimism. To hear that a weekend, it was, I think, a little bit reality settling. I've talked about the key, in my opinion, is Sam Brown running the football. I think the running backs in general are strong. But obviously, the offense has to be able to throw the ball in some way. I do think short passes and play action. We know there's going to be RPOs. I've mentioned this before. Sean Bowman, tight end. Aaron Young out of the backfield. Wide receivers really crapshoot. I thought Schiano's comments were interesting in terms of, saying it was a talented but very young group, and really called out, Jaquay Jackson, Nassim Brantley, and Chris Long as veterans. I wouldn't say veterans, but more experienced, even though none of them are that experienced, especially at FBS and Big Ten. That being said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think there's still plenty of time to develop. We know Shiraka is going to have a run-heavy offense. What steps forward can Gavin Griffiths make? Gavin Wimsatt. Basketball in the brain, football in the brain, two Gavins. It's pretty funny that our highest-rated recruit in basketball and our quarterback in football are both named Gavin. Not a name you run across every day. So, as I digress, the point being is it certainly was concerning that the BTN crew, and Howard Griffith talked about the offense's job is to kick, whether it's a field goal or punt. Not the most inspiring words you ever heard about the potential offense. I think at the end of the day, if the Rutgers offense can be close to average, if they can average close to 20 points a game, if they can move the ball, 300 plus yards a game, if they can be in it in terms of time of possession, if they can limit turnovers, which the BTN crew did harp on a lot, they don't have to be a dynamic offense. They don't have to be a great offense. They just have to be okay. if they can be okay, I think that's really the key for the defense. And this is where I flip. So, the defense is getting a ton of hype. I'm really excited about the defense, the depth, the improved depth at linebacker, the improved depth at the defensive line, the new faces in the secondary with the returning faces has the potential to be really good. I think Flip Dixon, safety with Benusin and Shaquan Loyal, I think the safeties could be really good. Obviously, linebacker, really, really excited to see what Moses Walker can do. Mo Toure is back, along with Tyron Powell, who was added to the Buckets Award watch list yesterday. And then you also have, obviously, Deion Jennings, defensive line, plenty of talent there. Young Buck, Kenny Fletcher, really high on him. Isaiah Eaton, transfer from Ole Miss. I mean, these are new faces mixed in with the old stalwarts of Mayan Hadasu, Aaron Lewis, Keontae Hamilton. The defense could be really good. But the defense made strides last year, but really fell off in that last month. Really fell off. I think the irony of the season was that Michigan State game in East Lansing when the Rutgers offense had a pretty good day. Monungai had a tremendous game. I think his best running game at Rutgers. Wimsatt made some throws. It was, in my opinion, the worst. I'm not really looking at the Ohio State games like that. In terms of winnable games, it was the worst performance for the defense last season. They did not have it. And if they had just played average that game, Rutgers would have won. So that's actually encouraging in some way, right? I think that having Michigan State at home this year, I think that is a winnable game. It's not going to be an easy game. But I think there's a lot of question marks with Michigan State for sure. But my point being is that I don't think you can't overreact that the offense is going to be terrible. You can be concerned. But I also don't think we should overreact and overhype the defense. And I simply mean that part of that is tied to the offense, right? The defense, we know, can get worn down. And with certain injuries, I mean, I thought in November, they were really worn down. I do not think they were at the same level, and statistically they weren't. But just in terms of how they played and the same pop and they weren't the same defense in November. And that is a real shift that Rutgers has to get past to make the next level as a program and get to a bowl game and win games in November. And obviously the schedule is brutal once again with who they play in November: Ohio State, at Iowa, at Penn State, and then Maryland. Not an easy slate at all. You do have the bye last week of October going into it. But my point is the defense needs to prove that they can be a top half of the Big Ten defense. And there are some holes to fill, but obviously it's going to be the strength. But how good? How good can the Rutgers defense be? How much of a gap can the offense close? That is, two huge questions. And then the special teams is the great unknown that we know nothing about. So that obviously wasn't really covered in the BTN. But again, I think it is one practice. I think that there's certainly some tangible things that came out of it. I think part of the issue, and this is not a criticism, because I do understand why Shiano runs camp the way he does in terms of access with media. And, I do personally wish he made the coordinators available more often, because I think they're both very well spoken. I think they're both really interesting to listen to. And I think they're both professional and smart enough to be able to say certain things without saying things you don't want said. But my point is, when BTN goes there and gets all this access and you don't have much throughout the rest of camp, that's when overreactions can happen, because that's the main part of what is going to get out there publicly, right, in terms of training camp. So, and I actually don't think Shiano really cares. I think all he cares is about getting his team ready and doing what he thinks is best to get the team ready for the season. And that's what he should care about. But I do think that, with BTN being there and raising some concerns on offense, it kind of, everyone's panicked, but maybe their fingers got a little closer to it when there's really no reason to do that yet. I'll have something coming up on Northwestern soon, but very interesting story there. Training camp, just with how they're handling things, and obviously the controversy this week with the shirts, and a unified team. I think Ben Bryant, the Cincinnati transfer quarterback, it's a concern. He could throw the ball. So Rutgers is going to have to really be able to run the ball. Gavin Wimsatt's is going to have to be able to get a feel. I'm very excited about the season. I'm very excited about the first game. I think that we just have to exert patience, which is tough. Now, let's transition to hoops. They had their first exhibition on Thursday night. They beat Senegal Select 85-83. They were actually down late. Andre Hyatt had 3. He had 7 trays in the game, 7-11 from 3, at 30 points. And then on the final play, Antoine Woolfolk won the game on a tip-in. And the program did put out some footage of both of those plays, which is pretty cool. There was no live stream. There was no box score release. We thought maybe there would be. There wasn't. I posted a recap based on what was available and all the stats that were available. Rutgers did shoot 18-30 from 3, which is impressive. But I think it's funny, half glass full, half glass empty. Some people are looking at it. I mean, people are looking at it from both sides, right? I tweeted that you shouldn't overreact to this. Rutgers was out hiking all day in the African sun. They went to, a former slave port. They're not game day type conditions in terms of what their activities were during the day. Brand new arena. They didn't have a shoot around or anything like that. The rotation is not the rotation, right? I mean, Austin Williams isn't playing right now. Noah Fernandez didn't play a ton. He's still new with the program. Obviously, Moat Mag isn't playing. And this is a time to tinker around and play around a little bit with transitions and things like that. And the competition's really unknown. Some Seton Hall Syracuse fan who's a journalist was, tweeted about, is it time to panic and all that, and the select team, and Rutgers should have won by a lot more. I mean, hey, the average age of the select team was 28, so that was a factor. I just don't think, there was even some. It was also partly a scrimmage too, where things didn't even count. So I think that take that with a grain of salt as well, in terms of don't overreact. And I think the difference with hoops too is they're not going into the season. Football is going into the season. Basketball is not. They're still, a couple months away from the preseason even beginning. So the value of this trip is not performance-based. It's bonding, it's experience, it's grounding the program in terms of their mindset, in terms of their values, in terms of their culture. That's the overwhelming priority of this trip. Yes, you want them to win every game. I think knowing what we know about yesterday, and then Andre Hyatt going out and hit 7-11 threes, the team hit 18 of 30. They shot 32% last year from 3. I mean, nobody shoots over 40% in college basketball. But if this team can shoot 35, it's almost like incrementally with the offense in football. If Rutgers basketball can shoot 35% from 3 this year, that's a huge uptick. We know their defense probably is going to take a step back, but if the offense can take a couple steps forward, there's a potential for a net gain there. So encouraging stuff there. What I loved about the final play is Antoine Woolfolk getting the offensive rebound, making the entry, the outlet pass to Derek Simpson on the break. Derek Simpson misses the layup. And who's there for the putback? But Antoine Woolfolk. Wolf can run the floor really well. I think he's going to be a real asset in transition. He looked more athletic. He looked stronger. He looked leaner. And he covered a lot of ground in a short time period, from that outlet pass to getting to the other end of the court, grabbing the offensive rebound and putting it back pretty athletically, I might say, at the buzzer. Now, again, it's just an exhibition. There's no reason to overreact, but that's a positive takeaway, right? That's something that's translatable. Shooting 3-point shots well in an exhibition is translatable. So I put value in that. I don't put a lot of value in the other things that happened on Thursday. And overall, listen, it's fun to be talking about football and basketball in the present tense once again. And we'll see what happens in terms of how training camp translates to September. We know Rutgers football has to get off to a strong start. We know that there's only so many winnable games on the schedule. And then with basketball, there's a long way to go. There's guys that got to get healthier. But this team's starting to gel just in terms of this experience. So it's encouraging. And I'm just excited that the fall is almost here. So thank you for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful. And I'll have an article up, FYI, on Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. They're playing on ESPNU on Saturday, 8 p.m. for the Elite 24. They're on the same team. Perhaps a preview of things to come. And I'll have information on that just in terms of the week. They've been nonstop. They were at Curry Camp last weekend. I wrote about Ace Bailey being the MVP. They were at Nike Academy earlier in the week. Now they're the Under Armour Elite 24. Exciting times in Rutgers basketball, and hope to be exciting times in Rutgers football this fall. Have a great weekend.